Finally, a student who passed.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Eric,
Ty,
and we are ShantottoCast.
welcome back.
Yeah, episode number this will probably be 17. And again, final.
Sadly, yeah, I'm giving up all of my money to Anthony Fantano. I'm gonna become a hermit and listen to exclusively things that he rates as a 7 above 10. 7 out of 10, rather.
It's gonna be a lonely life, but a very musical one.
Yeah. At least I get to listen to some Kids See Ghost and Death Grips.
Yeah, I mean, Death Grips is pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty good, decent band.
So,
Uh,
but as
so-
you guys probably inferred from the title, today's topic is, we're gonna compare. Well, we're gonna be comparing and contrasting. I can English words. We're gonna be comparing and contrasting Yu-Gi-Oh and Final Fantasy TCG.
yeah, I think we should just give this like a super clickbaity title and just be like, why I left Yu-Gi-Oh for FFTCG or something really dumb, just to catch like those random people in the recommended just being like, what? Final Fantasy has a card game?
Maybe we'll talk about it. We'll see. I mean, that has a history of backfiring on a lot of people on YouTube.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, title aside, whatever we end up making it, yeah, the idea here is that we're going to be doing this with a lot of other TCGs as well. It's not just us taking jabs at Yu-Gi-Oh for the sake of it. We are actually going to be comparing, contrasting, and kind of showing the unique differences and similarities between all these different card games because most of them share some common elements. I mean, duh. But there's also some very interesting differences that you might not expect, to hear about.
Yeah, and I feel like it's worth telling our audience this is like the third or fourth time that we've recorded this episode. Like this,
Yeah.
not this exact episode, but like we've tried constantly to just like free run it, like just wing it, and then we tried doing a small script and that didn't work.
The first time
And-
we did this was almost 4 hours.
Yeah.
So if you think the
yeah.
meta-analysis video we did recently was bad,
Yeah, it was really bad. It ended up us just going on tangents and just repeating the same stuff over and over, and it was pretty bad. Then we did it again, just as bad, and then, if I remember correctly, I think we did it 3 times before this one. I think this is our 4th time.
yeah, it was the second or third time that we did a lot better, but it was still really long, and there wasn't much that I could cut out of it without it being, removing a core part of what's important.
So hopefully we keep this one to like about an hour.
If
There is
even
no
that.
way that we do like a half-hour version of this episode.
Yeah,
There's too much to talk about.
right.
Our notes are 4 pages long.
Hey, yeah, but it's easier to talk and simplify things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right, so let's make sure this one stays short, and let's just jump into the thick of things. Ty, how about you get started?
All right, so we're gonna start with our ethos, how we got into playing Yu-Gi-Oh. I played Yu-Gi-Oh like right when it started. I was like 5 or 6, and I literally played it all the way through until we got to Synchros. After Synchros, I was going into high school. I stopped playing, and then picked it back up when pendulums were coming around. I found out about Yu-Gi-Oh Pro and like all the online simulators, and then I played through, got really into card games again, all the way through Link era. Then around Link era is when I quit. What was the one deck that I made fun of? The Untitled Goose Game joke. Link
Oh, Sky
archetype.
Strikers.
Yeah, Sky Strikers. Sky Strikers were like just about to come in when I quit. Like it was next set, and I was like, I'm kind of done with this. I mainly played Fluffles. Fluffles was like my main deck. I usually played Fluffles in meta. And then I tried to play it at a semi-competitive level, but I never really went far. I never went to like a regional, but I could usually do pretty decently at a tournament. Then how about you?
So I also started playing right around the beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't remember whether the cards or the show got me into it first, but I took them basically side by side. I eventually ended up quitting in 2004 after a particularly rough tournament experience, and it just kind of kind of turned me off to the whole card games in general. So I quit Yu-Gi-Oh, I quit Pokemon, everything. And then in around 2016, I think it was, that you started playing again. And, about a few months after you got back in, you were like, hey, come on, get back into Yu-Gi-Oh with me. I'm like, fine, I'll do it.
It's got cool dragons.
Yeah, you baited me with the dragons. And I played for a few years after. But then around mid 2018, which is well after we discovered Final Fantasy TCG, I finally quit after Sky Strikers had already become a thing, because I just wanted to take Final Fantasy more seriously. And when I played Yu-Gi-Oh, I didn't really have a main deck, but I did kind of frequent burn style stuff.
And you played like a lot of meme decks.
I did play a lot of meme decks. You're correct. And there was also that one deck that you got me. You're like, I don't know how this works. Can you figure it out? And so I was just like, yeah, I'll play this deck that you built for me.
Yeah, I forgot what the deck was.
Abyss Actors.
Anyway, Abyss Actors, yeah.
Yep. Which got more support recently. Anyway, I never really played competitively. I just played for fun at locals at the shop where I worked. And yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh is just kind of a fun game that I threw money into, but I didn't get super salty when I lost, because I knew I had a feeling I was going to lose. I was playing mostly burn and meme decks. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah. So we both have a bit of ethos. We've both played the game quite a bit. Like, we both have put in a good chunk of time. We both worked at card shops, which I think is worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Card shops that hosted Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, and I was entering them and I was judging them. I was level 1 judge at some point.
Well, not only were we working at shops where we hosted Yu-Gi-Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh was the game at those shops.
It still kind of is.
Oh, the shop I worked
Water
at,
Tower,
absolutely.
very much so is.
Yeah, we still have about 80 regulars.
And Lincolnwood just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
but, rip. But anyway, so we want to just talk about Yu-Gi-Oh, kind of the reasons not so much the reasons we quit, but things that we kind of found issue with, things that didn't really sit well with us. Kind of the main reason why we jumped over to Final Fantasy. Because overall, to give the quick summary, Final Fantasy as a card game treats its players a lot better. And we're going to kind of get into why.
Yeah. So don't take this. But don't take this as us saying not to play Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk to certain people, they'll say that for different reasons. But we do still like Yu-Gi-Oh. Don't get me wrong. We're not sitting here trashing it, saying it's a bad game.
Oh, I'm here to trash it.
I mean, we're gonna trash
I'm here to say
not,
it's a bad game,
but not in the way, but not in that sense.
Not to offend you. We're not literally just saying if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, you're a bad person or anything like that. We're not insulting the Yu-Gi-Oh community. A lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh people that we interacted with were awesome. They still are awesome. They're still great. We still talk to the vast majority of them.
True.
And we keep trying to get them into FFTCG to no success whatsoever. But but anyway, so let's just kind of hop into it about
cool.
The first big point, and this is something that I see a lot of people talk about, a lot of Yu-Gi YouTubers talk about this, is meta, power creep, and the ban list.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with the meta and power creep for Yu-Gi-Oh, and then you could talk about FFTCG.
Sure.
But basically, a very common complaint about Yu-Gi-Oh is that the meta is rarely good, and that power creep is insane. Working at a card shop, we got a lot of that. We get a lot of kind of how people feel about the meta, and there were so many times where it was just people saying, "Oh, this meta's trash. Oh, this deck is top tier," and it's just too much. In my opinion, the last really good format when I played was Klee, Teller, Knight, and Shaddoll, because it was 3 even decks. 2 of them were pretty expensive. The third one wasn't super expensive. There were a lot of rogue decks that could play, and it was just a kind of good triangle format. But ever since that format, we just had tons of just top tier decks that just threw everything out of the window. Things that were just significantly more powerful. We saw Pepe, Cosmos, and these decks were also getting consistently more and more expensive. Especially Cosmos. Cosmos had $100 cards day one. Just nuts. So like to get a full Cosmos deck within, I don't know, the first month of the deck really being out, it was like an upwards of like $700.
Yeah.
Like I assume you remember that. Like it was.
Oh yeah, no, I mean there's stuff that's been worse since. Like there are decks that have certain stuff in Sky Strikers that got up to about the whole deck combined was about 1,300 at one point.
Yeah. Oh, there was Zodiacs where I think
Oh,
Zodiac
God.
combo was a like $120 card, and you needed three of them. You couldn't play the deck without three of them.
Yeah, that one was bad.
Yeah, and the thing is, this isn't something that's uncommon in the game. Like, it happens every meta. Every meta has that one deck that it's probably the best deck, but because of that, it's an $800, $900,000 deck because of that.
Within the last year, I can quote the Thunder Dragons.
Oh, yeah, Thunder Dragons got really expensive.
That was really bad.
Yeah. And we just kind of see a lot of that in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where there'll just be one thing, super good, super meta. You need it, basically, to play competitively, and it's $3 gazillion. But let's move over to Final Fantasy.
So Final Fantasy, like all card games that exist, will have meta and some level of power creep. And you know the issue that we're going to be discussing today is how card games handle that power creep and handle that meta. Power creep does exist in Final Fantasy TCG. However, it is a much slower process, and the cards from many sets ago are still going to be largely relevant. And whether that is artificial or it's just the persistence of players and strategies leaning on those cards, so it's both. Some of those good cards just haven't been power crept. Other times, it's players just really refuse to let go of that card, and they keep making sure it's still good.
Yeah. Or it just does something so simply strong enough that it just kind of sticks around. It just becomes a general staple.
Yeah, you can't power creep it without just breaking it. And so the meta in Final Fantasy has, in fact, actually been largely healthy. And the only time that a deck really dominated, like really oppressively, you could argue Turbo Ice. And the Turbo Discard Ice deck was problematic, but answers arose. So even that wasn't that huge a problem. And while we have consistently topping decks, such as Weewa, Mono Ice, Earth Wind, Ice Fire, it was really rare, and still is, for one deck to dominate the whole scene for more than a few major tournaments. And even top-tier matchups will still have their bad matchups, kind of like I mentioned. Decks will arise to combat the oppressive stuff, and ultimately end up in a 3 or 4 deck format. Some metas we've even seen up to 8 valid decks in one meta period or season, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, like the worst that we've really ever had it was when Mono Wind took over, which check out our meta review episode, because there was like 4 or 5 tournaments, large tournaments, that it was just like Mono Wind, Mono Wind, Mono Wind. But in that same meta, without anything getting banned, like we started seeing that change. Weewa started coming in, Earthwind started coming in. Like we started seeing other better decks kind of take over that. Like it wasn't oppressive to the point like in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where like out of top 36, 28 of them are running Sky Striker or a Sky Striker variant.
Yeah, I forget which tournament it was recently. What was the? It was one of the It was either a YCS or a Nationals, where, it was like 78% of the top 16 decks were like all the same, almost identical.
Oh my god!
Like sans a couple tech choices, they were almost identical decks. And that was one of those moments where Konami was just like, "Wow, we need to do something about that." Oops, here comes a ban.
Yeah, and like talking about bans, like another big thing that a lot of people complain about in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the ban list.
Yep.
And so if you didn't know, if you don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or if you don't follow the meta, or even just like advanced constructed, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a huge ban list. And every set, every ban list, it seems to get a little bit bigger. The funny thing is I wrote these notes last week, and the most recent ban list, they took 3 cards off. kind of get to that. But the ban list is always the center of the discussion because some older cards are still on the ban list and are almost unplayable. Like they're attached to these archetypes that just don't really do anything now, or they've been so power crept that like if you bring a full powered version to a table, you'd still get kind of wiped by modern meta. And there's just so many of those cards on the ban list, which is part of the reason it's so large. There's just been some really questionable bans through the years. Like they tend to only really ban stuff if they really need to eject a deck out of the meta, or if they really need to push a new set or like archetype. Really, it's like very rare that we even get reasons for the bans. Like Konami doesn't really talk to its player base too much on saying like, "Hey, we banned this because we thought it created, a toxic meta, or we felt like it was just generally an unfair card, or people have been asking for it." Like we just kind of get bans and we just have to speculate.
Yeah, and
like, hey,
I think the exception to that is the Firewall Dragon.
Yeah.
Because it's such a universally applicable card that someone from Konami was participating in a large-scale tournament, and it was a representative. I don't think it was actually like a developer or designer or anybody on the testing team or anything. But they actually experienced a 15-minute U-board combo where, you know, for those of you who don't play, you use monsters to basically take control of the entire board, both sides, and lock the other person out of using basically anything.
They can't use their extra deck, which is like a key part of the game.
Right. But even sometimes they were using tokens or kaijus or whatever to take control of the regular board too. And so locking basically 15 minutes, which is, you know, a third of your play time, just to do that whole combo to result in a one-turn kill. So they were like, wow, the complaints about this were valid. We should probably ban that card. And then it happened.
And that was like the last time that I could think of that they actually told us like, hey, this is why this got banned. Like, we knew it was good. We didn't think it was that good, but now we see that we were wrong. Like, that was the only time in recent memory for me that we actually got like why they banned something.
Yeah.
And like the other thing is like some archetypes are just too good to the point where they have to ban the better part of the archetype. Like the Zodiacs really come to mind, where like think about half the cards in the archetype ended up on the ban list. Like almost all the playable ones ended up on the ban list. Rat Pier, which is like the center of the deck, was like set to 2-1, I think. The two main Xyz monsters were on the ban list. I think one of them still is. Combo, which I mentioned before, which was $100-something card, was on the ban list. Like, and that happens a lot. Like, it's not too uncommon for that to happen.
Yep.
If we look at banning in FFTCG, it's a bit of a different story.
Correct. So far we only have 4 cards that are banned. And those cards are Gesper, Thaumaturge, Dottaluma, and the Opus 1 Riku, or is it Opus 2?
Opus 2.
Opus 2, right. It's a hero. It's the one that can make your opponent discard.
It makes them
mill. And so Square Enix is their full stop. They're either on-off with a ban. There is no in-between. It's either banned or it's not. Konami at least limits some cards to 1 or 2 per deck. But, you know, Square Enix, they say, yes, you can have it in your deck, or no, you cannot have it in your deck. But to be fair, none of these cards needed to be banned. With the exception of maybe Gesper, all the cards fit in their niche and did just too good a job. But they even Square Enix was like, look, we don't think this needs to happen, but we're doing it anyway just to be sure the health of the game is, you know, staying consistent. Dottaluma was banned, you know, because they had similar type stuff coming up in the future. A preview, I think, is Azul from the latest Duel decks.
The big one was Lucretius, because Lucretius would be able to just get out your Cactars for free.
Well,
basically.
So, Azul was the pseudo replacement for Dottaluma, and Larquetius was, kind of the card that would have broken the whole deck that Dottaluma existed in.
Because I remember Dottaluma got banned, and then we got the we got the preview for Lucretius. People were like, oh, that's why he got banned.
Yeah, it was pretty quick and easy. I still stand by the fact that it doesn't by the thought that it doesn't need to be banned, but that's we can fight on that hill a different time.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a little bit.
Yeah, we really have. But yeah, like none of them were like direly needed to be banned. Like I think once again, Gesper is like the only one that kind of teeters that line.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if he had like an errata, it'd be better. But it was, just the fact that Gesper could just make you basically discard 2 every turn, with like 0 consequence to the person using it because you're just playing out your hand every turn. But once again, if that's your only problem, if like we have 4 cards on our ban list and 3 of them could not be on there.
Yep.
Like compared to Yu-Gi-Oh, where you've got like Pot of Greed on the ban list, which is a card that will probably never come off the ban list without being heavily
that's a
errated.
card that was just objectively not thought through.
Yeah, and tons of stuff like that. Like there's so many examples of it in Yu-Gi-Oh, and like if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player, like listening to this, like you were probably around when Stratos was still banned. Like Stratos was a card that did nothing. And, like it was part of an archetype that couldn't really do much, but it was on the ban list for so long. But should we move on to our second point?
I think it's also worth noting that a lot of these consider the fact that Final Fantasy is a much newer TCG, and normally there'd be a reason for them to screw up more, but they've had experience with looking at others and learning from their mistakes, and Final Fantasy had chapters to learn from as well.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, one of the lead designers on FFTCG was a Magic Pro.
Now that I'm not aware of, we can fact check that at a different time.
Yeah, if we have a fact check, if we have like a little article, we'll throw it up onto the screen if I find it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But we can move on to the next big talking point here, which is pricing, short printing, and rarities in these card games. Ty, why don't you take it away with Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah. So while there's a lot of budget options for players, Yu-Gi-Oh can get extremely expensive. We mentioned before about how some staples would reach $100 a copy. Like it doesn't even come close to like Vintage or Modern Magic, which we'll talk about on another episode. But like a meta deck could usually be in upwards of like 500, 600, and that's if you have the staples. Like without staples, a deck can easily get to the thousands. And with the ban list always kind of looming, you're not going to be playing it that long. Like occasionally there will be a starter deck that if you just buy 3 of the starter deck and then usually some like additional staples, you can like play a solid deck. Like when I started playing the Hero Strike deck was really good for that. You still need the staples, and the staples will still cost you. Like it's really kind of like screwed if you do, screwed if you don't. Like you have to kind of have those staples, but you also have to sell your left arm and leg for them. Modern example is a card called Lightning Storm, which is a very good card, obviously, but it's $115 a copy. And it's almost a mandatory 3 of, and you're almost playing at like this like handicap if you don't have them.
Lightning Storm's gone up, Ty.
It's gone up more?
Oh, and don't even get me started on the Prismatic.
Oh my, yeah, Prismatic's like 500.
No, it's nuts. Over 1,000.
What?
Per.
Oh my god.
It's about 1,300 on the low end.
Okay,
for one card.
Oh boy. So really quick, let's bring up kind of the price of sealed product. So a box of Yu-Gi-Oh is around like 80 to 90 bucks depending on where you go. I've gotten it as low as like 65. And it's 24 pack box that comes with usually 2 secret rares, 4 ultra rares, and 18 super rares. That was the last update that they did to those. And then supplementary products will have a lot of reprints, a lot of needed reprints for meta, but they're usually like $20 to $40 sealed. And while they help generally bring down the price of the cards, like it's not enough to be effective. Like I feel like if Lightning Storm was in the next like tin, the card would still be like 30, 40 bucks.
Oh, it'd still be more than that for sure.
Yeah. But let's compare that to FFTCG pricing.
So as we kind of talked about in our meta analysis videos, decks can get expensive, but we've consistently seen cheap decks able to top at large events as we one that we marveled at, the $4.44 Chocobo deck that won
Oh,
two
yeah.
events. Like, that's ridiculous. That's nuts.
Yeah.
The most expensive meta deck, arguably, is Earth Ice, which the baseline for is about $300. And if you really go nuts with the max rarity, somewhere in the realm of $650, with a lot of the value being the Shantotto, Sephiroth, and Cabranths.
Yeah.
Ty's version of Weewa, a deck that consistently, I guess, gets high levels or high results at events, kind of turns out around 150, with a more strictly meta version being about 180. WAF, the deck that's been in and out of meta, since the last set, is about 160-ish.
A little bit lower now. I rechecked
it's
some of
come
the
down.
prices.
But the point is, the range for a standard meta deck is anywhere between $100 or $120 actually, and about $200, which compared to Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh is like really low.
Yeah.
Like, considering the fact that, like, I make the joke at work sometimes with, the really expensive Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Oh, $120, you can build 2 decks for that in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, and it's true.
Yeah.
Like, you can literally, if you had one of those prismatic foil lightning storms, what's the name of the card? I gotta double check.
Yeah, no, you
lightning
got it.
storm.
You got it.
That will literally get you a max rarity Earth Ice deck and a max rarity mono fire deck.
Okay, yeah, it'll probably get you more than that too.
Probably. Like that just blows my mind. The fact that one card can just, annihilate that. That
Right.
one card can be so much more in another game. Like, I think I realize that I haven't written this down, but I think our most expensive single card has been argued, or people were talking that a full art Sephiroth from the latest set could reach 100, but I don't think it has.
Yeah, and there's also the inflation of, the quarantine and nobody's buying product. So, context.
Yeah.
But moving on to box prices, a box of FFTCG contains 36 packs and about 8 to 10 Ls, and that also includes foil starter cards, 2 full arts in modern boxes, somewhere in the realm of 20 Hs, and can cost anywhere from 90 to 120 from local shops. Most shops aren't going to charge actual MSRP of 140 because they love the players too much. And Final Fantasy also doesn't really have supplemental products outside of the pre-constructed decks, such as the starter decks, the dual decks. But those starter deck and dual deck sets also contain full play sets, at the very least 2 ofs for any given card. And I'd like to keep in mind that the boxes also have box toppers. So
that is really something
card.
that's not in Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, that's just not a thing.
about
Well, I
that.
mean, now, it kind of is now because you have the Lost Art stuff, but most of
Yeah.
it is reprints of cards with different art. It's not
And-
new cards.
The quality kind of varies. I remember they had Monster Reborn, the first one, but then they had like the Pieces of Exodia, which have been reprinted to hell.
Yeah. Called by the Grave one's kind of cool, though.
Yeah, Called by the Grave.
Yeah.
Or Call of the Haunted, you mean?
Actually, no, I think it's Called by the Grave. Because it's not called by... It's a different card.
Okay.
It's a spell, not a trap. Anyway, so we can move on, though, to the concept of short printing and pull ratios.
Yeah, so short printing isn't something that we have in Final Fantasy. Like, it really seems, as far as we can tell, it really seems that if you buy a box, you have just the same amount chance of, like, pulling any, like, L in that set than anybody else who bought, like, the same box. Like, it seems that way. We don't have the, like, strict numbers. That's kind of what it seems. Everything, if it's in its slot, you have the same chance of pulling it out of a box than the next box. In Yu-Gi-Oh, they have something called short printing. So this was originally done for commons, where commons would basically be like one per box, and it's usually reserved for like very weird commons or very good commons. But they said that they've cut that out recently. However, a lot of people have found out that it's kind of moved over to pull ratios, and pull ratios have generally been pretty bad in Yu-Gi-Oh. So, some cards that are seen as like needed in certain decks, despite the decks not being meta, can easily reach $100-something because they're just so hard to find in boxes. A really good example of this is the recent Eldritch. I think his name's Eldritch Golden Lord. And he's like a one.
Eldritch. Yeah, Golden.
Eldritch.
Yeah, you got it.
Which honestly is an amazing name. I like the one thing I do miss about Yu-Gi-Oh is the naming conventions. But like Eldritch Golden Lord is like $100 card. It was printed in like some kind of like intermediary set. It was in like kind of one of the smaller sets.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, you had such a low chance of pulling him in that set. Like it was clearly short printed. People have been saying that they've been only getting 2 to 3 copies per case, and it's in a slot where you get 1 per pack. Like that should be at least like 1 to 2 per box, and people are pulling 1 to 3 per case. Like that's nuts, because it so artificially just drives up the price of this card, and it artificially drives up how much people are spending on this set because they just want their playset of Eldritch.
And also keep in mind, Konami has said that they do this mostly for outside the Japanese region, because the Japanese region is where they do a lot of their kind of user testing.
Yeah.
And so they, that's how they kind of figure out what to make very rare, short printed, etc., outside of Japan by looking at what happens in Japan.
Yeah.
Which is why they have separate metas.
We should probably mention OCG at some point, because a lot of people who play Final Fantasy probably have no idea about the OCG TCG.
Yeah,
difference.
That's actually a good point. Yeah.
Which we'll do. Actually, we'll do it as soon as we compare the last, or Final Fantasy doesn't have short printing, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. We'll talk about the rest in the last leg of the video, but Final Fantasy has no concept of short printing. There's nothing that really needed to be short printed, like promos, dual decks. No full products, no individual cards really have been short printed. Like, sure, hard to get your hands on, but that's a distribution problem, not so much a printing or inclusion issue.
Yeah, like any 2 boxes of Opus 1 have the same chance of having a Shantotto in it or a foil Shantotto in it. Like that's just a fact.
Right.
Obviously a foil Shantotto is hard to get your hands on, but it's because a lot of people want them. It's a popular card. It's one of the best cards in the game, as we said in our previous episode.
Yeah.
It's not surprising that it's hard to get your hands on one, but if you just buy a box, you have the same chance of getting it as anyone else.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that Final Fantasy, they still print some of the original sets and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, the old stuff isn't hard to get your hands on, and it probably won't be for a very long time.
Yeah.
Like, those cards are expensive because they're good, not because they're hard to get.
Yeah. I mean, even, I think recently on the Reddit, Kageyama said, like, oh yeah, we're going to get ready to reprint Opus 1 because people are still asking for it.
Yeah, it's still a good set.
Yeah, like, they don't just kill off good sets because, like, oh, well, we might as well drive up the price or drive up the demand for reprints or whatever. It's just, oh, like, you guys need more Shantottos? We have a larger community and we need more Shantottos? Here's some more Opus 1. Some anthems, here's some more Opus 1. Don't worry about it, B.
They're directly involved in the accessibility game. With with reprints, with re-releasing, product and whatnot. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh, they have to reprint stuff in a different set to keep it alive and keep the secondhand market, thriving. Konami has also come out and said, and I guess this is a good segue into the third point with company support. But Konami has straight up said, we don't like the idea of a secondhand market for our game. We want you to buy stuff directly from us.
Yeah. And to be fair, Final Fantasy hasn't really done much for that. Well, they haven't commented on the second market a whole lot. But
no, but they've done things that, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. So our third point is company support, and like, we're gonna get into how much we love Square Enix, and how much Square Enix loves us. But like a big thing with Konami, and I really felt this way when I played, is it really feels like Konami doesn't like care to support their community that much. It just kind of seems like they just kind of throw stuff our way, and then they moderate the ban list, and that's about it. And like for some quick examples as to like why it really feels that way, or why Konami doesn't know isn't super connected with its player base, is like sneak peek promos. This was kind of a big thing where sneak peek promos would be ultra rare versions of like cards that weren't very good. They were just kind of bulk cards, like nobody really cared about them. It's like, why would I want this promo? And it seemed like they usually avoided making promos too good, and it wasn't really until the new arts where they actually were like, oh hey, people actually want this, we'll actually start printing these as promos. Another thing is like supplemental product is usually like very expensive, or I don't want to say very expensive, but it could be like 30-40 bucks, but you only get one of the card that you need, so you eventually need to buy 3 of that product. Like a good example of this is the like Kaiba tin back in the day, where it was like, oh yeah, we've got these staples that you wanted reprinted. It has I think it was Cherry Blossom. It was one of the hand traps. Ash Blossom. It was like, it has Ash Blossom in it, but you have to buy 3 of them. You want 3 Ash Blossom, and it's like, okay, so I have to eventually spend 100-something bucks.
Well, also you weren't guaranteed anything either.
Yeah. Well, what was it? Ash Blossom was one of the cards that was in the promo pack, and then it wasn't in the like tin
you're
pack.
Talking about. Oh no, you're talking about
the guaranteed cards.
Yeah, no, you're talking about, it wasn't a Kaiba thing. It was a different set. I forget the name of it. I think it was Dual Power or something similar, where they gave you alt art versions of popular hand traps. Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about, but that's also another good point, is if you wanted a playset of those alt arts, you had to buy 3 of those. That was a $35 product. You're spending $105 just to get 3 of them. Just to get 3 of the most used cards in the meta. Like, that's a little ridiculous. Like, mind you, secondhand market was still super expensive on them, but like, still.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of rare that Konami like really listens to their player base about what needs to be reprinted. They basically just kind of look at like, oh, this is expensive. It's been like 7 months. We should probably reprint it. We should probably throw it into a tin or something. Like, it doesn't really feel like they really throw the players a bone.
Yep.
It's always at like, oh yeah, we're giving you this. You have to pay $50 for it. You have to pay $40 for it, but you can finally have it. And then I feel like the other thing that we should probably mention is the tournaments. It's not a secret that Konami doesn't pay out their players. Like, it's a lot of product pushing for a lot of investment and a lot of time and money spent into getting there.
Yep.
So like, if you play Final Fantasy, I don't know if you've been to a regional, like, but regionals we usually get like 4 or 5 packs per entrant. And then if you get top 8, you get some other stuff, but an entry into a regional is like $15, 20 maybe. Or like Yu-Gi-Oh, it'll be about the same, 20, 25 bucks, but you get 5 packs, and then that's it. Like, if you get top 8 is when you get like a playmat or a deck box or like additional prizes depending on who's hosting the event. Then you can get an invite to Nats, which will give you more stuff. But like, the highest prize like at Nats is like travel and accommodations to Worlds. That's really good. Second place is a Nintendo Switch. Like, it's not even more packs. It's not even something that's like unique to you. It's just a Switch.
That's just a cool friggin' product.
Yeah, and it's just, that's cool, but it's just so weird that it's like, oh, you don't get travel to Worlds. Here's a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, right.
Like, it seems like they're just giving you anything, and like, top 4 gets a plaque. Obviously, that's nice, but top 16 gets card sleeves.
And they're like fancy, unique sleeves too.
Yeah, and then top 16 gets like an invite to Worlds, and like, that's all Yu-Gi-Oh really gives you. Like, it's not a lot. Like, ultimately, like, if you kind of look at like Final Fantasy being a much smaller card game, has like prize support that's really on par with that, despite the fact that Final Fantasy hasn't been around for more than, it's been 4 years.
Yeah, like the fact that the top 4 out of a tournament will get an invite to Worlds for Nats. Like, you get a plaque. There's so much prize payout for anybody who just participates in a Nats level event. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh!
Final Fantasy, you mean?
No, I'm saying yeah. So in Final Fantasy, and then in Yu-Gi-Oh, like, okay, top X players get invites to Worlds. I think it's like top 4 or 6. But then whoopee, you get a playmat and some packs, and like that's it. And like those playmats go for a lot of money if you sell them. But there's really not much else unless the host of the event decides to give it to you.
Yeah, like something worth pointing out is that they give out like exclusive cards at these tournaments if you get like top 4 or top 1 or 2. But the only way you can get really a return on investment for your meta deck, for your travel there, for all of that, is to sell that card. So you don't even really get to keep your prize if you want to make money.
Yeah, or if you want to break even. I mean, some people don't care because they have the money. That's why they're in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the first place, but...
Yeah, but if you look at Final Fantasy, which is a card game that hasn't been around for a quarter as long as Yu-Gi-Oh! And we have these very comparable, prices, like, it's a little sad.
Yeah, it's really telling how much Konami wants to put into to the player side of it. Compared to Square Enix, where, some of the designers are on Twitter answering questions regularly. They're at the events, talking to people, interacting. I would argue that the YouTube and podcast content is about equal, but it's not from the company. That's from the fans.
Yeah, it isn't until you get to Nats where it is from the company.
Right.
And, like... To be fair, like, Square Enix isn't showing up at every regional, but...
Well, right.
Still, like, there's times where, like, RB and people who work for Square Enix still show up at regionals.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just the fact that Final Fantasy is so much smaller, and we have something so comparable to such a large card game. Oh, something else worth noting is that, like, these are all payouts for top 16 is roughly what we've talked about for Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments will be like extremely large, hundreds of players. Final Fantasy, if top 32 gets a good payout, half the event gets the good payout. There's about
really
60,
only people
70.
that went like, 0-3, 0-5 that didn't get paid out.
Yeah, and like, that's kind of part of the symptom of having a smaller card game. Like, you're not going to have as many people. But, I don't know. For me, it's just insane that the money's not there for Yu-Gi-Oh! When it's like it's part of the big 3. It's one of the biggest card games in the world, and they're still paying out their tournament players like they're kids. The Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
I feel like this is part of the part where, like, it was just kind of us free-farming a little bit, but, like,
yeah.
I don't know. Overall, from someone who's played both games, it really feels like Square Enix reaches out and talks to us a lot more than Konami ever did in my years of playing Yu-Gi-Oh!
No, yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, even watching the players on, large-scale events, you can see how cool the prizing is and how interesting stuff is. And, like, you can see, some of that motivation to compete beyond just the sake of competition. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's just like, you're competing just to prove that you're the better player, and then, there's absolutely zero guarantee you're going to be relevant in a year. Whereas Final Fantasy, like, yeah, you can kind of tell who's going to be around and who's not after this year because they actually have a chance of being around.
Yeah, and something else that's kind of cute, it's not a big thing, Magic's also kind of done this, but in Final Fantasy, you get, whoever wins Worlds, you get to decide a promo, and then that promo was given out at tournaments with your name on it. I think that's really cute.
Yeah, that's
I love that.
Awesome.
Like, I'm very happy that I have my Alex Hancock Sparks. That's awesome.
It's just a cool thing, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited for the new one coming out, too.
Yeah. Oh, I also still have the 3 Cactars that I got from the Summoners Cup.
Right.
Like, we just get all this, like, really small stuff, and, like, all the stuff that it's just like, hey, we kind of heard you. Hey, we know that this card is popular and it's expensive. Here it is as a promo. Here it is in the dual decks as a 3 of. Like, I don't know. It's weird. It's like they just listen to us, and it really feels like they listen to us. But in Konami, it's just like, oh, we could finally get Ash Blossoms, but it's $60.
Yeah, you're paying for a chance to get the card, usually.
Yeah. And I think the final thing we should talk about, and this will be like a brief point. I assume that the episode's already pretty long.
No, we're not too bad.
What are we at, out of curiosity?
We're just coming up on 46 minutes.
Oh, yeah, we still have a bit. So another thing to mention, this isn't in our notes, but OCG and TCG.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh has kind of two divisions almost, the OCG and the TCG. The OCG is the Asian market, primarily the Japanese market.
It is
and
exclusively Japanese.
Yeah. And they get everything like months ahead of when the TCG gets it. The TCG is basically everywhere else. It's America and Europe primarily, as well as Latin America, etc. So the OCG will have a set for like 2 months before we even get to like taste it, before we even get it. And they really use it as like this test market to see like, oh, so when we send this over to the TCG, this common card was really good and did a lot in the meta. Let's just make it a secret rare so it's really, really hard to get. And then they send it over to us.
Yep. And there's some times where they don't even put those cards in for a long, long time.
Yeah, I assume any Yu-Gi-Oh player listening to this will just be like, Needle Fiber. And like, I understand Needle Fiber was a broken card and the TCG meta was better without it. But the fact that it was a card that didn't come here for so long.
It became a meme.
Yeah, and then another card was, this one's, important to me, Fright for Patchwork. It was a card that went into a non-meta deck, a like rogue deck, and it wasn't particularly good. Well, it was a really good card, but it wasn't going into a good deck, and it took them like 4, 5, 6 months to give it to us for no reason. Like there was no reason they couldn't have just thrown it into another pack.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the thing is that happens a lot. Like that doesn't happen like to one card every set. Like it happens to a couple cards like every big change in the game.
Yeah. Whereas Final Fantasy, it's a global community. It's a global meta.
You get everything at the same time.
Yeah.
No place gets like region exclusive cards. The closest is like the Cactar promo I have is in Japanese, but oh no, like
it's a common otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Like the thing is, it's really cool to have my like promo, and I'm very happy that I have it. But at the same time, it's also just a common card. So if I need 3 Cactars, I could just dig in through my bulk really quick.
Right. Yeah, it's all concurrent stuff. Nothing's exclusive. I think the only exception is the sideways cards, which are only given out at certain events.
Yeah, but those are more collector's items than anything. They're
definitely not players' items.
Not playable.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, the one that was given out in the Sideways Warrior of Light that was given out in the 2017 collector's book is playable.
The only problem with that is that nobody will open their collector's book.
Right? Nobody wants to take it out.
Yeah, and it's more of like just a cute little ornament than it is anything else. Like
I'm waiting for the
cool.
2018 one.
Yeah, or maybe who knows? Maybe they'll do what we did with the meta analysis and be like, "Hey guys, we know we're late. Here's 3 of them like attached in one big book."
2018 and 2019 all together.
Yeah. I mean, we're already halfway through 2020. They might even just say, "Screw it, we're throwing 2020 on there."
Sure, yeah, I'd take that. First year and then 3 years and then just do it every 3 years. Hell yeah, I'd take that.
Hell yeah, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so I feel like it's worth restating, like, hey, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, like, we're not trying to just like take a dump on you. Like, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, keep playing Yu-Gi-Oh and keep enjoying it. It's still a very fun game and it still has a lot of creativity. It's still a great game. The only thing is, like, after a while, some of the things that we've talked about gets to you, and to some people it's enough to push them out of the game. For us, it was enough. And even just talking to some of our Yu-Gi-Oh community, they're just like, yeah, I want to get a playset of Lightning Storm, but it's $300. Like, it's just what we've seen and what we're so tired of, and maybe you feel the same way. And I wrote down in our notes the final point is like, if you want to try something new, if you want to get into something completely different, try out the Final Fantasy TCG. It's a fun game. It's really good.
Yeah, it's not something you're used to, but it is definitely, in my opinion, a healthier environment.
Definitely. And, PlayAsia and Squeenix likes us, so
Yeah,
that's
there's
nice.
that.
That's like the one thing of me being mean, where, it's, they actually talk to us.
Yeah. So,
But,
I
yeah.
think that's about everything.
I think this is actually going to be the episode that sees the light of day.
Yeah, right? After X takes.
Yeah, so many takes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Depending on when this episode goes up, I assume it'll be up by the end of the week. We have Fix It Friday coming up, where we're going to be fixing decks on stream. Look forward to that.
Yeah, it's always good. I mean, it was a great time last time. I had a blast.
Yeah, I had a blast too, and we already got our first submission, which makes me very happy.
Yeah, we got a submission within 10 hours of the post.
Probably close to 3 or 4 hours.
Even better.
Yeah.
So, well, by the time this episode goes up, you'll still have a couple days to submit. So, hope to see your decks by June 19th. We'll probably cut off submissions by that morning. But yeah, so thanks for listening, guys. We always appreciate your input if you are willing to provide it. If you feel like saying, just some words aren't enough for you, then the Ko-fi link is in the description of this video. Feel free to throw a couple bucks our way.
Yeah, and if you're clicking on the Ko-fi link to complain to us about how we feel about Yu-Gi-Oh, throw in a couple extra bucks and we'll read it. Just kidding. But
okay, Co-Money.
Sorry, yeah, Co-Money here. Yeah, throw us a couple bucks on Ko-fi if you like it, if you want to, if you can. I know it's kind of a hard time for everyone, so obviously no pressure. But honestly, just listening is enough. Feel free to share with your friends if you want. Yeah, thanks for listening, really.
Ty, what do you mean no pressure? We agreed we're going to stop making content if they don't pay up.
Yeah,
Ty,
I forgot
you can't go back on this.
Oh, I didn't realize that was on the 5th page of our notes.
Yeah. How did you forget that? Hello?
Oh, no. How could I forget?
All right, we will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Hopefully see you Friday. Bye.